Right, I am John. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. And I say that I am recovered in accordance with page 90 of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. We come to our groups, meetings, treatment centers, and so forth because our outside circumstance has gotten bad. Sometimes we'll just recognize that our inside circumstance is bad. Much like Roland Hazard did there on page 26 and 27 when he had sought out psychiatrists all over the country and then went and placed himself in the care of the celebrated physician, Dr. Jung. Whatever the case, we know there's something gravely wrong with us, that we're not functioning well in society, we're not functioning well in our private moments, which may be a lot worse than how we get along with society. It's just the sitting down by ourselves that oftentimes is the torturous moment. Not having a solution is really obviously the problem, not an effective solution. And where we really get ourselves in enormous amounts of trouble and compound our problems is in seeking the wrong solutions, just trying new things out that are non-workable. So if you'll jump to page 31, we're going to read about this a little bit. And it's just the first paragraph on page 31. It goes on to say, despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe they're in this class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. If anyone who is showing inability to control his drinking can do a right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. Here are some of the methods we have tried. Drinking beer only, limiting the number of drinks, never drinking alone, never drinking in the morning, drinking only at home, never drinking in the house, never drinking during business hours, drinking only at parties, switching from scotch to brandy, drinking only natural wines, agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job, taking a trip, not taking a trip, swearing off forever, with and without a solemn oath, taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms and sanitariums, accepting voluntary commitment at asylums. We could increase the list ad infinitum. And that ad infinitum has turned out to be the most important part of my recovery. It's understanding I switched from beer to marijuana, from marijuana to meth, back to marijuana with some beer, marijuana and natural wines, methamphetamine and beer, only on the weekends, only after 5 p.m. in the afternoon. Then as I continued pursuing these non-effective methods, it became no beer, no wine, no meth, no marijuana, no chemicals. It became work. It became prestige. It became pomp. It became a drive to try to show everyone I'm the best father in the world, that I'm the best husband, the best businessman. So really, it came down to the worship of people and using that as a drug. By every means of self-deception, I attempted to prove I didn't have this problem. The very core of the problem is that desire to prove I don't have it. That was my great obsession. Well, here's the the thing that I found with all of the above is they are experiences that are temporary in nature. We know that if I get high on some marijuana, that's only going to last a few hours, right? I get high on some meth, that's going to last for a few hours. If I get drunk, it's going to last till I pass out and wake up the next day. If I make a lot of money, that's going to last until I either spend it all or I've got it in a savings account and it starts becoming my belief of security. And I start putting faith in this bank account. And I will relish in the feelings, just like a drug. Oh, look at my numbers rising in my bank account. I'll have this false sense of security. Well, what my experience has been is that I've done all of those things. I've had hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank, been in a position I could have retired several times in my life. But I didn't retire because the problem was not taken care of. I've had businesses that were just online businesses, virtually no employees, very low overhead that were paying $10,000 a week. Actually, I had it right at 1,100 customers paying $39 a month faithfully. So it's a little over $40,000 a month. None of those delusionary methods of solving my internal problem worked. So what I'm encouraging today in this meeting is to get sober all the way. Quit with the delusions. I mean, you can go on and experience these things yourself, or you can sober up now. The ideal thing, I will promise you from my experience, is to get completely sober. So we're going to look a little bit at what the condition is. This is never mentioned in AA meetings other than, well, just once in a great while. I say never. I haven't heard it mentioned except by a few of us that really pay attention to what the book says. But on Roman numeral 30 in the doctor's opinion, he's trying to categorize different types of alcoholics. It says, there are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. The classifications of alcoholics seems most difficult and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. We're all familiar with this type. They're always going on the wagon for keeps. They're over-remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision. So really, we just have to ask ourselves one simple question. Have I tried to quit multiple times? Tried to go on the wagon, as they say here, and found that I couldn't? I know for me, there were many, many times that just on my own, I would try all kinds of personal techniques. I'd been strong, had good willpower with a lot of things. I tried willpower. I tried prayer and meditation on my own. I tried, having visions and images that might help. I tried a lot of things. What's significant about that? Well, it just told us that we're psychopaths. That means we've got a real problem. This is not an imagined problem that was induced by drugs or alcohol. It's a real problem. We know today that we're born with it. And the most recent studies, they've identified that the genetics that produce this condition are something that actually manifest in a number of areas. One of those is a psychopathy. Well, what does that mean to us? That means just coming up with some idea about how we're going to treat our alcoholism is probably not wise at all. I mean, we've got a severe mental illness. And there's probably nothing more important for a mentally ill person than to identify how to treat that. Now, it tells us in this book, it says if we overcome the spiritual malady, then the mental and the physical straighten out. So it gives us a real good clue at that point of what we need to do. That's to take care of the spiritual malady. Well, the spiritual malady, we just discussed it. That's that belief that by manipulating my outside world, by getting everything so situated, I will somehow be able to function more effectively with my emotions. I won't be, as it says here, emotionally unstable anymore. See, if I just get that really nice new car, then there's this delusion that somehow my anger issues will go away. It's deep-seated. I may not even consciously think about that, but there's this belief that somehow life's going to settle down and be smoother. Once I get maybe the new car, maybe it's the right relationship with the right woman, or maybe it's the right job. But it's a delusion. Because after I get that, whatever it is, I'm still emotionally unstable. It didn't work. It's completely non-effective. So that delusion is what I'm trying to actually have basically soul surgery. I'm trying to cut out that delusion from my life. Or I suffer the consequences of continuing with that delusion. Let's go ahead and jump over to page 61 and let's take a look at page 61. It's about midway through this first paragraph, and we're not going to read the whole thing. But there's a question here. It says, what is his basic trouble? So let's look at those words. What is my basic trouble? What is John's basic trouble?
And I mean basic trouble it means like the underlying reason for it, right?
Yeah,
like the basic of it.
It's the base of it. This is the basic trouble. And it says, is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? So we're going to look at that sentence real close too. Is John not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? It comes down to a simple question. Am I being kind to get what I want? If I am, then I'm pretty sick. I'm still sick at that moment. If it's to get what I want, then I'm still suffering the psychopathy. Now, I can go into, just as any of us alcoholics can, a million forms of justification and rationalization and just get a lot sicker, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't everybody have self-seeking? Well, not to the extent that a psychopath does. In other words, with a normal person, it appears there's always an opening for how it's going to affect and what it's going to do to someone else. Even if I'm a really selfish, normal person, there's a little bit of room for it to not be all about me. But with the alcoholic, that's not so. It just seems it's all about me. Even when I'm being kind, I see the end of the road. Here's what I'm going to get. If I'm really kind to these people, then this will be the outcome and it's going to benefit me. Yes, sir?
Is that why we get pissed off when it doesn't work? Like it talks about the guy that we think we're the God of the universe, we're the director of the play, and then we get nice, and that doesn't work, and then we really get pissed off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here's how it works. I mean, if you want to just look at how things go, is I really want to get what I want because the world revolves around me. When I'm trying to do this, I'll be really nice to you. And I'll treat you just lovey-dovey. But if you don't do it, then I can get mean. I mean, I'll talk crap behind your back. I'll try to bring people against you. I'm mad because I didn't get what I wanted. And I don't care how much I hurt you either. In fact, I want to hurt you. That's what happens. I'm thinking about me the whole time. Yes, sir?
A perfect example that I really relate to is whenever you're out there and you're slanging, somebody brings you a TV to trade for dope, but they don't say they want to trade it for dope. They just bring you a TV as a free gift, and then they expect something in return. See, that's the kind of where we're at as people. You know, we're essentially the people bringing the TV. We bring the TV and expect them to give us something in return, but we're not going to say we want something in return.
We expect it.
Yeah, we just expect it, and and us expecting something like that or trying to find the end result to this pattern is not. It's not. I mean,
We expect quid pro quo, but it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Never.
You're exactly right. And you could give 1,000 more examples.
Yeah.
In its core, what it is, I'm thinking about how I'm going to benefit out of any situation. Everything revolves around me and my gain. So I'm trying to manipulate the world continually. So it goes on to give us another sentence here. Is he not the victim of the delusion that he could wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? So I am a victim of this delusion, which is a mental illness, that if I make enough of my own decisions and get my own way enough times, then I'm going to have satisfaction and happiness. That's going to be my payoff. Well, if we look back on the doctor's opinion there, that's what we call the emotional stability. Satisfaction and happiness is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for emotional stability. But I'm doing it backwards. I'm trying to have control of my emotional nature by using something that's not attached to my emotions at all, and that's the physical world. It's not going to work. I mean, I'll control my physical world perhaps, but it's not going to help my emotional instability. It's not going to help my emotional nature, i.e., it's not going to help my spiritual life. That's the delusion, that by somehow controlling the material, the emotional will work out. They're two different things. There's nothing wrong with the material world. There's nothing wrong with people being bazillionaires. There's nothing wrong with people being broke. There's nothing wrong with people having lots of assets or little amount of assets. It has nothing to do with my emotions. So that delusion has to be completely removed. I have to get over it. That somehow manipulating this thing that has nothing to do with my emotions is going to benefit my emotions. Once I've done that, now I'm at a point that I've actually understand there are two worlds. There's a spiritual world, and there's a material world. My spiritual world involves a whole lot of spirit, emotion, feeling, love, hate, kindness, fear, courage. That's my spiritual world. It's all that stuff that I can't really take a picture of, but it's there. Those feelings are real. Now, my method for dealing with them for a long time, I explained to you, was trying to manipulate my material world, trying to manipulate things with drugs, trying to manipulate how I felt, manipulate my spirits through things. It didn't work. Then for a long time, I found that I was trying to function by shoving feelings, pretending like they didn't exist, or ignoring feelings. And that didn't work so well either. After a few years, that stuff just didn't work. Plus, it made me very insensitive to other people's feelings. I mean, I might have found that I was managing pretty good by saying, I'm not going to let feelings affect my life. I'm going to go ahead and get this stuff done despite how I feel. And that worked pretty well. But how does that work with your children? How does that work with your wife to tell them, don't have feelings? I did it. What an idiot.
I don't know why them things have so many feelings though.
Because they're real. You have them too. We all have them. And we may have gotten, or we've shoved our feelings down so far that we don't recognize them. But believe me, you've got all the same feelings that any other human being has.
I mean, and sometimes you act out on those feelings without even realizing that that's the feeling or emotion that you're acting out on. I mean, just, whenever I get angry with somebody, it's oftentimes because I'm scared to tell the truth. And I'm also lying at that point. But
so there's your feeling, right? I was afraid, and therefore I acted out in a lie, and then the lie got deeper, and I got more afraid, and then I got dishonest. And yes, those feelings take us on a journey that's really rough. Now, there is a school of thought in the 12-step programs, and I guess other places, that let's kind of pretend like feelings don't exist. But let's look at page 54. In the first full paragraph, it says, "We found too that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring on. Have we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? And then with a better motive, have we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last. Were not these things the tissue of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else." So that school of thought that starts telling you to ignore this part of the big book, it's not going to work forever. It'll work for a long, long time. And I guess in the face of dying from heroin or just trying to shove and pretend like we don't have feelings, the pretending like we don't have feelings is probably a better option. But it's not recovery. We're still completely unrecovered, because our belief is that somehow by manipulating our outside world, we're going to get that emotional stability that we seek. And it's just not going to happen. You can't become emotionally stable and shove the feelings. In fact, it tells us here that feelings are the tissue of which life is made. That we've been living by little else. It directs the course of our life. Now, this is before you get to the third step, okay? So, let's just say there's somebody in this room that feels like they've done all 12 steps, and they haven't done this step. You haven't done 12 steps. You're still at step 1 or 2. You might have went through your whole list and all of that, but it's like a chain. It's got multiple links, and you've taken one of the main links out of the chain. Therefore, there's no chain at all. This is a real program, and it's vital to get the second step, which is restoring us to sanity.
Yeah.
Okay. So, let's look at what being restored to sanity is. That's exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm talking about the second step. You probably didn't realize that as I've had this 24 minutes so far that I've been talking, but I've been talking about the second step. Sounds like I'm talking about some advanced spiritual stuff, doesn't it? I haven't even made it to the third step yet. There's some deliberate planning there, and I hope at this moment you're waking up to what just happened. Is if for any reason you believe that the material world is going to bring you emotional stability, security, and comfort, you're sorely mistaken. It's not. And if you believe that, then you are still in the throes of alcoholism. Nothing has changed other than you've quit drinking and quit using drugs. That belief, that faith that you would have in money, people, things, sentiment, and yourself, that faith is a core indicator that your alcoholism is alive and well. Nothing's changed. There hasn't been a third step done yet.
Well, I know we're so, just like the incident with me looking at cars, that's how subtle our psychopathic brain is. It wants us to return to that course.
Oh, absolutely. We do want to return to it. Okay. So let's get back to the gravity of what we were just talking about. Nothing's changed. A third step has not been done yet. If this second step is not done, there's nothing to build a third step on, which is the ability to trust God 100% to take care of us. To quit playing God. It says it several ways. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, you can too.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to point out that we're learning that logic is not everything, and feelings are also not everything in this situation, especially the way that we've been running our lives using only feelings. But logically, we had to come up with the feeling of this, the spirit of the universe. I kind of want to read it off 52, where it talks about the bedevilments. It says, we had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness, and we were full of fear, unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. And all of those are just emotions that you felt, the wrong emotions and the wrong ideas and the wrong attitudes as a result of doing exactly what John had said, and that was, trying to wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world by managing well. So, that's all.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And, I'm going to share a couple of things here that have happened in the last 6 months or so. There was a young man here that I was sitting on the computer in there, and he said, I've been here for a while. I've been sober. I'm going to be my own man. He went home. I gave him a big hug and wished him well. But I knew he wasn't ready. He had not gotten the basic concept. He had a good sponsor. In fact, he has the same sponsor as some of you guys in this room. He'd only thought he'd gone through the steps. But he came down to, he thought he could control his emotional nature by manipulating his material circumstances. He went back into a full relapse. That is the relapse. If you or I get at a point that we say, my emotional nature will be controlled by a material means, I'm in full relapse. Well, that man lasted pretty good for several months. I wished him well when I saw it was his birthday on Facebook. Some friends came by his house, he thought it was a good idea that day to go take a drink. He died that evening from alcohol poisoning. This is not just some obscure thought. This is a real human being, a living, breathing young man that was a friend of mine that decided he knew better than what this book said. That he thought there were other priorities, being his own man. So however you say it, whether it's I've got this, I know what I'm doing, don't tell me what to do, I need to be my own man, those are all statements that a person in relapse would make also. Relapse is this false faith that we have in material things to control our emotional natures. So what do we do about that? Well, quite simply, we have to look at it for the spiritual world and the emotional world and the material world. We have to divide the two. They have to be completely compartmentalized. The material world, if we get some nice material stuff, great. It's best to not get excited about it. It's best to not have any emotion attached with any material thing. When you start getting these things overlapped, you got a problem. In other words, it's not just women that I can have lust after. I can have lust after a new car. Well, lust is a feeling. That's a spiritual world item. That's not to be over here in the material world. I need to separate the two and recognize if I get a bunch of really nice things, I don't need to get excited about it. I don't need to be letting my emotions in that deal. If I get a great job, I need to recognize that it's just a great job. It could be gone tomorrow. It has nothing to do with my emotional nature. On the other hand, with my emotions, I need to really watch what's going on in that emotional world. Because quite frankly, you know, like I said, I've had several $100,000 in the bank on a number of occasions, and I've made millions and millions of dollars thinking that it was going to take care of my emotional nature. That someday I was going to get this security, that I was going to get this comfort, I was going to get the things I wanted emotionally, and it never worked. It actually made it worse. The more money I got in the bank, the more I worried about losing the money. So it didn't solve the fear problem at all. I promise you right now, if you got $1 million and you put it in the bank, you're immediately going to be emotionally challenged of what do I do with this money? How do I handle it? Where do I spend it? You're going to be talking to everybody around you. And it can cause a case of emotional bankruptcy in minutes, just having a lot of money or getting the next great job. Am I criticizing material things? Not for a second. We do have a very real material world, and we do need to function in it quite well. But we've got to recognize the psychopathy that we have, this inability to control our emotional natures, is multiple times more important than what we get materially. If you were broke the rest of your life and you had emotional stability, you're a level-headed man.
Well, you probably wouldn't be broke the rest of your life.
Probably not. But if you were, that would be much better than being completely emotionally unstable, not having a level head, and having an abundance of money.
Do you think like Siddhartha and the Lamas and all them, do you think that they the fact that they can just like exist without really much of anything, like walk hundreds of thousands of miles throughout their lifetime with no shoes and just pray and meditate, do you think that's like a type of mental disorder, or do you think it's just like sheer acceptance of?
Well, historically speaking, there's an enormous amount of evidence that people that sacrifice material things tend to be happier than people who have material things. That's where that old tradition came from. And it's not just a few names, but there's an enormous history books full of, in fact, that's what saintliness was all about. In sanctification, it was about relinquishing everything of this world. We see St. Thomas of Aquin, St. John of the Cross, St. Francis of Assisi, St. Joseph, and thousands more, actually.
Now, on what you said, kind of bouncing off what my dad said, the Dalai Lama can call any country at any time, and then work the same way with Mother Teresa, and they'll show up at his front door with whatever he wants at any time. Anytime he can call Air Force One and they'd show up and pick him up. It doesn't matter. He doesn't live by the material world though. He could walk into a Ferrari shop and say, "Give me that Ferrari," and they'd be like, "Okay, here's the keys, dude." He's the Dalai Lama.
Yeah,
he doesn't live by material, but he's so well respected because of the spiritual way of living and the things that he does. He could have anything that he ever wanted.
Man, I don't know how much I trust a llama that drove around in a Ferrari.
I mean, I wouldn't either.
But let's look at what Matt is trying to say here is that he's got more money than any of us. Now, he doesn't need it and doesn't want it. But if he called a Ferrari dealership and said, "Today's the day Dalai Lama needs a Ferrari," he'd probably end up with a Ferrari that day. They'd ask him what color.
Yeah.
And the Dalai Lama's in relapse mode.
Yeah. So that is another thing about having this spiritual life and spiritual existence. Rarely do we get shortchanged materially. It's just our values, what matters so much to other people, don't matter anymore to us. We're out of that mode of fighting with life and trying to eke out a living. It's not long before we have people saying, "What can I do to help you?" So there are some advantages. Not that getting a spiritual life going is about getting what I want. It's about living for my Creator. It's about having a relationship with this power that exists in our universe. And finally, let's talk about how to plug into that. And we're going to wrap this thing up. In this wall here, there's a wire that I don't see, but it carries electricity.
That you also can't see.
That I can't see. And there's an outlet, a plug right here. If I want to plug a lamp into this, then I can probably get some light from that lamp.
Assuming it has a bulb.
Let's stay
Focus.
let's stay focused here. If I don't plug that lamp in, it doesn't matter that the power is there and that the lamp is perfectly usable. It's not going to come on. I've got to plug in. Well, with us, how we plug in as human beings is we plug in through helping our fellows. Because God made each and every one of us. We're all God's children. We're the children of a living Creator. It tells us that on page 28 of the Big Book. Children of a living Creator, regardless of our race, creed, color, or anything else. Children of a living Creator. Well, when we help God's children out, we're connecting with God. It's like plugging in that lamp. So I now have plugged into the power. If I don't help other people, then I'm not going to get that power. I'm not going to be able to feel that new power flow in, and therefore I'm going to burn up a lot of my own energy, and there's not going to be the extra energy that I need. So what do? Well, once I've looked at getting sane here, presuming I actually want to get sane, let's just say that, I want to get this thing where my emotional nature is more important than my material world. Come out of that delusion. Well, at that point, I'm really just doing a few simple things. I'm turning my life over to God. I'm making a list of stuff of, the people I've harmed, the people I'm resentful at. Get all that nonsense out of the way, right? Because that was affecting my emotional nature. If I'm resentful at people, my emotional nature is not okay. And then I show other people exactly how to do that. This is the whole message. The whole message is to clear up my emotional nature and to show you what is important. And that's your entire message too. That's how you plug in to your living Creator. Is by relinquishing all those other thoughts, accepting they were failed thoughts. None of that nonsense mattered. It led you to drinking and drugging because it was so miserable. All those values and ideas you had about having pomp, prestige, and money and worship of people, all that was nonsense. Getting sane. That what's important is my emotional nature. Following a little pattern of how to get that done, and then showing others. There's one other little catch here. You got to do it for free.
For free.
Got to do it for free. And what will happen is you'll enjoy something much more valuable than a bunch of advertisements and coupons and material things and cars and this and that and the other of this material world. You'll enjoy peace of mind. You'll enjoy a new happiness and a new freedom. And most importantly, your emotional nature will not be unstable anymore. Well, that's the whole message of this program. That's the whole message of all spirituality since the beginning of time. We've talked about it in 41 minutes here. In search of life's meaning. We've covered it. That's it. There is no more meaning to this life than to be able to control your emotional nature. Now, I've heard somebody say, I really have ambitions. What could be a better ambition than to control our emotional nature?
Amen.
Since nothing else is going to do it. Well, that's all I have for today. Shall we say a prayer and wrap it up? Right, I am John. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. And I say that I am recovered in accordance with page 90 of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, we come to our groups, meetings, treatment centers, and so forth because our outside circumstance has gotten bad. Sometimes we'll just recognize that our inside circumstance is bad. You know, much like Roland Hazard did there on page 26 and 27 when he had sought out psychiatrists all over the country and then went and placed himself in the care of the celebrated physician, Dr. Jung. Whatever the case, we know there's something gravely wrong with us, that we're not functioning well in society, we're not functioning well in our private moments, which may be a lot worse than how we get along with society. It's just the sitting down by ourselves that oftentimes is the torturous moment. Not having a solution is really obviously the problem, not an effective solution. And where we really get ourselves in enormous amounts of trouble and compound our problems is in seeking the wrong solutions, just trying new things out that are non-workable. So if you'll jump to page 31, we're going to read about this a little bit. And it's just the first paragraph on page 31. It goes on to say, despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe they're in this class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. If anyone is showing inability to control his drinking can do a right-about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. Here are some of the methods we have tried. Drinking beer only, limiting the number of drinks, never drinking alone, never drinking in the morning, drinking only at home, never drinking in the house, never drinking during business hours, drinking only at parties, switching from scotch to brandy, drinking only natural wines, agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job, taking a trip, not taking a trip, swearing off forever, with and without a solemn oath, taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms and sanitariums, accepting voluntary commitment at asylums. We could increase the list ad infinitum. And that ad infinitum has turned out to be the most important part of my recovery. It's understanding I switched from beer to marijuana, from marijuana to meth, back to marijuana with some beer, marijuana and natural wines, methamphetamine and beer, only on the weekends, only after 5 p.m. in the afternoon. Then as I continued pursuing these non-effective methods, it became no beer, no wine, no meth, no marijuana, no chemicals. It became work. It became prestige. It became pomp. Became a drive to try to show everyone I'm the best father in the world, that I'm the best husband, the best businessman. So really, it came down to the worship of people and using that as a drug. By every means of self-deception, I attempted to prove I didn't have this problem. The very core of the problem is that desire to prove I don't have it. That was my great obsession. Well, here's the thing that I found with all of the above is they are experiences that are temporary in nature. We know that if I get high on some marijuana, that's only going to last a few hours, right? I get high on some meth, that's going to last for a few hours. If I get drunk, it's going to last till I pass out and wake up the next day. If I make a lot of money, that's going to last until I either spend it all or I've got it in a savings account and it starts becoming my belief of security and I start putting faith in this bank account. And I will relish in the feelings, just like a drug. Oh, look at my numbers rising in my bank account. I'll have this false sense of security. Well, what my experience has been is that I've done all of those things. I've had hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank, been in a position I could have retired several times in my life. But I didn't retire because the problem was not taken care of. I've had businesses that were just online businesses, virtually no employees, very low overhead that were paying $10,000 a week. Actually, I had right at 1,100 customers paying $39 a month faithfully. So it's a little over $40,000 a month. None of those delusionary methods of solving my internal problem worked. So what I'm encouraging today in this meeting is to get sober all the way. Quit with the delusions. I mean, you can go on and experience these things yourself, or you can sober up now. The ideal thing, I will promise you from my experience, is to get completely sober. So we're going to look a little bit at what the condition is. This is never mentioned in AA meetings other than, well, just once in a great while. I say never. I haven't heard it mentioned except by a few of us that really pay attention to what the book says. But on Roman numeral 30 in the doctor's opinion. He's trying to